You're listening to Podcasting for Experts with honest conversations about using podcasting as a tool to grow your reach, increase your audience, make a positive impact on the world, and most importantly, to get paid for your efforts. I'm your host, Jess, and we are Pristine Podcasts. Let's talk podcasting. Hey and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 6. This is Jess, co-founder here at Pristine Podcasts, and today I am bringing you an interview with the very lovely Chris Templeton. Chris began developing a mental model called Oh, the Stories We Tell in 2003, and today we're taking a deeper dive into this model and how the stories that we tell ourselves about our experiences can positively or negatively impact the experiences that we actually do have. Chris is driven by how completely the model applies to most personal and professional situations throughout our days, and his deep desire to share our role in creating stories that either serve us or don't, and how to move more consistently to authentic stories that serve us for life. Before we dive in, I just want to tell you that we are discussing some graphics that Chris created to visually represent his model in this episode, and I will be including those graphics in the show notes, the link to which you can find wherever you are listening to this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed the interview as much as I did enjoy talking to Chris, and let's get started. Hey, Chris. So thanks very much for agreeing to come and do this interview with me. I'm very grateful when we're just at the start of, this will be season 2, but we've just started putting out our episodes. And I'm always happy when I have people that come and they're happy to interview even for a newer podcast. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
It is my pleasure completely. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm really excited actually after everything. That's why I tend to go a bit down a hole when I'm learning something new. So as I was researching, it was early Saturday and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. I have to read this bit next. And then I was like, I have to stop now because otherwise I'm still going to be here in 6 hours looking up things. So I had to come back to it last night quite late because I was like, okay, I do want to keep looking. So very excited to ask some questions.
So let me ask you one question. What was it from your perspective that kept pulling you back? Like, it's one of the things that I think is really cool about what I do, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective, like why there was that compelling desire to keep going back.
I think without going into too much detail, without talking about the model so that people don't go, huh, what? There was a part where you specifically talked about the major self being the light and the minor self being the light switch, and about you kind of blocking the light from actually shining out into the world. And the whole thing of like, we actually want the abundance, the peace, those positive feelings, and we're kind of preventing actually those from happening to us. So I was like, yeah, that's a really good point. So I wanted to come back to look that up in more detail and understand how that happens and potentially why that happens. And I always find that very interesting because once you know, you can do something about it. So that was the thing that kind of got me back to it. I love that.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. That's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said, like, I am, if it's okay, I'll check with permissions and things, but I might want to share some of the diagrams and like link back to the website, because I think for this episode, it would be really useful if the person has like the visual representation in front of them as they're listening. Because it is something that, like I said, I literally took a big piece of paper and I wrote my own notes on it so that I could be more visual about it. So that would definitely be useful. But before we dive into it, I think I read you said that you started this work around 2003. Was there something specific sort of in the run-up that led you to start thinking about this more?
Well, I think I've always been really interested in why people behave the way they do. I was the kid that was always picked last on the team, in PE and that sort of thing. Boys love to pull girls' hair, and I didn't get that, in elementary school or whatever. So I've always had kind of, why do people behave that way? Because I'm pretty relaxed, pretty nice guy. So it just didn't make sense. But in 2003, as she loves to call herself, my evil stepmother, who I love and adore, said, hey, a friend referred me to this book, The Power of Now by
Eckhart Tolle.
Eckhart Tolle. Yeah. And very early into it, he says something along the lines of, we are incredibly good at driving ourselves crazy. And man, at first, I think my original reaction was, well, no, that's you and you and you and no. But as I kept reading, it was like, oh my God, I am the one that's driving myself. There's stuff there's always going to be stimulus that we don't like, but boy, are we good with running with it in our own heads and making up stories, especially if they're negative ones, where we make the situation so much worse than it needs to be. And we don't recognize that we're doing it. I mean, at some level, in reading that book, it's like, why aren't we even more screwy than we are as the human race? I mean, in a lot of ways, it's pretty screwy, but so to come to this realization that the majority of my angst about myself and the world around me was being carried by me and then defining it as a story, like, it wasn't, all of a sudden, it just kind of opened me up. So the power of now is all about living in the moment, which is powerful and good. But I think you need to have a way to do that. And that's really what this ended up becoming was, well, how do I do that? Like, it's not about, everything is wonderful now, because that just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, my brain will talk over that. It will just go, yeah, I understand that, but hear me out. And it will just talk louder in my ear. And I'm like, I can't shut it off. It's like.
Right. And so that's another big piece of what really got me going was this idea of the power of now. He calls it the pain body. And it's also referred to as the ego. In my model, I call it the protector. It is a part of us. We are hardwired, a piece of us, a perspective of our personality. It's the fight or flight response. And the problem is what you talked about is that it also becomes kind of the dark switch. It's where we go to these dark places that we just don't need to. So kind of recognizing that overall and just looking at it at the time, I was the father of probably a teenager and a couple of a 5 and an 8-year-old. And so it just was really fascinating to start putting that together and say, how can I apply this? Because one of the things that drives me crazy about the Enlightenment movement is you just have to be this. But nobody talks about how you get there in a way that I felt was really meaningful. There are people that do, but this is all about being common sense. I mean, if you want to go down the woo-woo road, you can, by all means. It definitely, has an element of God, the universe, infinite intelligence, whatever works for you. But it's just been such a fascinating process to kind of figure it out in my own life. And it's made a huge difference with me and my wife, my 3 kids, how I interact in the world, like really game changing, but in a nice, simple way that doesn't require all these external things.
Because I think the spirituality part is the thing. Don't get me wrong, I believe that everything is kind of connected in the grand scheme of things, but I'm not what you would call woo in that sense. I'm very realistic and I kind of need to see the things, how they logically connect to certain points in my life. And of course, if there is a pattern of things, I see the pattern of things, but I definitely can't just convince myself to just believe something that is out of what I feel I can comprehend. And that's where I find a lot of those approaches miss me. Like I try to read, like Gabrielle Bernstein, for example, I read The Universe Has Your Back. And I'm like, yeah, I do think believing in yourself is like highly important and believing that everything will be okay is highly important. But then it kind of went over a threshold where I'm like, nope, this bit kind of like lost me. And that's something that when I was reading through everything, I felt that the whole thing of like that light shining is something that I do very much believe in. But to me, that's actually something fairly realistic. Like it took me ages to learn that you don't force making money. You actually do your thing. And then money will come to you because of what you're doing, not the other way around. And I couldn't understand that for a very, very, very long time. And I think that's where this model is very much a perspective shift, because you have to reverse what you think. You think you have to hustle, you have to work, you have to just do, and then criticize yourself if it's not working and just do harder, do more. And I'm not sure it's in the doing.
And that is all of the protectors, this protector that I talk about, and we'll get into a little more. Protector, capital P, that most people call the ego, that's all up in that territory. And so what was really fascinating is in 2008, 5 years later, I see this talk by a woman named Jill Bolte Taylor about a brain scientist who in her 30s has a stroke, and she realizes what's going on. She's able to articulate on and off, oh my God, I'm having a stroke, and it's shutting down her left side brain. Well, that's the part of the brain that gives us our five senses. It's the part that categorizes all this incredible amount of information that's coming in through our senses and puts it, and it's where we store all our baggage from growing up and that sort of thing. And so for her, her left side brain was shutting down. And instead of freaking out, she knew she was having a stroke, but she called it her deep inner peace circuitry just kicked in. And so instead of being freaking out when her left brain's shutting down, she feels as big as the universe. She feels connected to everything, incredible inner peace. And so what really blew me away about that was like, oh my gosh, the left side of the left brain is kind of what we talk about if you let it get out of control, where the protector lives is the dark switch. And without that left brain, the right brain is this amazing place that people have been talking about for so long. And now the question becomes, and for her too, who has since recovered, is how do I balance the two? How do I make it so that my ego isn't just getting completely out of control and saying things to me that I would never, ever let anybody else say? And it's that I got to work harder. I got to change.
I didn't do enough. It's so bad. It's like the nonsense, it's like a radio.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's kind of the whole thing. And then ever since then, it's just been practice and playing with the model. And it's just something, it's one of those things that when people talk about passion, this is just something that is with me 50% of my days, but in a big way. And so, so I developed 3 questions and a resulting model that's all about really common sense and making it all the enlightenment stuff so much more accessible
or attainable. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So we've got our left brain, and that's our friend, the radio, that I don't seem to have an off switch for at times. It just, it just keeps going. And then you mentioned senses and language and, the ways we, I guess, express and turn that into things we can do and around the house kind of stuff, our work things. And then we have the right brain, which is more our connection to greater things in that sense, whether, like you said, you want to call it, whether you want to say it's my connection to the universe or some spiritual connection, or I guess it's that feeling that we have at times in life, right? There are those moments when you're just like, you feel it. To me, it's not something I see. I'm very much a feeling person, but I get that sensation at times. There's been times where we've just been randomly driving and I just got that feeling in the mountains, and I'm just like, this, I can't explain it to someone. You would have to be here right now and then you would feel this, but not, I can't put it in words. It's just the light, the air, everything. And at that moment, it's like.
The thing that was fascinating about this Jill Bolte Taylor talk was her whole point is, that is always available to you. And I think her point, better put, is it's always there, whether you're open to it or not. And so much of kind of the left brain thinking is black and white. So either once I get there, everything's going to be wonderful forever. Well, folks, it just doesn't work that way, as much as we want to believe that's it. And so what's really fascinating is recognizing, just like you did, one of my favorite examples of being in that place is driving down a freeway in LA, rented a ragtop, got REM Orange playing on the radio, and it was like the world was just a perfect place to be for me at that moment. And that is enlightenment. And so people would say, oh my God, that can't be enlightenment. Well, sure it can. So can falling in love, but it tends to be fleeting. It comes and it goes. But once you recognize all the places that are all the times when you've been in that place. It's like, oh, now I'm open to understanding that it is something that I come in and go out of. And thank God. I mean, so much of this thinking that's from the protector is, it's conditional. When I get there, I will be happy. And so it's a very ends related. For me, and what I'm trying to help people to understand is it's way more about the process and finding and being open to those moments with your family or with your friends or mostly with yourself, right? I mean, this is really about taming that guy.
I think that's where it's hardest almost. Like when you're with other people, there's things that kind of create those moments, but I don't have those moments mostly when I'm by myself at home, just on an average day. I tend to just be so in the mode of getting things done, or there's the laundry that needs putting away. And, I'm distracted by what's happening there and I don't take the time to just be.
Well, but we don't think about how to do it.
No, I wouldn't know how to start.
Right. So I came up with 3 questions. The first question is, what's the story I'm telling? So the first key to helping get that part of you to mellow out is to recognize him or her, right? You got a little protector in your head, and if you push that protector away, it gets more cranky and gets louder and starts saying things that are just not helpful in any way, shape, or form. But it's a story. It's a perspective of what the protector is seeing and feeding you all day long, right? Mm. The second question is this story serving me in this moment? And it's a binary question. It's either no, it's not serving me, or yes, it is. And the second question is not, hey, how you feeling? Because we get stuck in how we feel, especially with the protector. Well, I'm feeling crappy and I'm really mad.
Oh, yeah. And then the feeling comes to the next thing, the feeling gets the next bad thought, which then gives you the next bad feeling. Like I only learned 6 months ago or so that feelings last a few seconds. And then after that, it's our meat up here, like we like to say, coming up with the next thing, and that we then start to feel bad about. And then you're in this downward spiral that you're not finding the way out of. I could do that for hours, if I let it go on.
And so does everybody else. There's nobody on the planet that doesn't or hasn't been in that place, and for most of us, it tends to be specific areas that we struggle. And yet exactly what you said, the emotion, the feeling goes away. And now it's up to the protector to keep that feeling alive. And the protector starts to go, well, and look at that.
Oh, yeah.
What I call one of the things that I talk about is when the protector's in charge, one of the things that he or she is doing all the time is proof of truth. And it's also known as confirmation bias. It's always trying to prove that it's right. Yeah. And so when you think about so much of that story that goes on is just really not helpful. So the third question is there a more authentic story I can tell? And this question isn't, is there a story that I can tell that'll help me to feel better? Man, we get so stuck in feelings, and I'm not saying feelings aren't important, but if we look at them as an indicator instead of as fact, the protector looks at emotions as fact. I'm angry and that's that. Oh man, okay. When you move to an authentic story, you're like, you know what? This is really frustrating. Now what can I do about it? Like when the protector's talking, it's all about problem orientation. It's fear-based. I'm a victim. I feel powerless. I'm judgmental. I love this question. What do you think the opposite of fear is?
I'm not sure, actually. Those ones I don't find very straightforward, because I also only recently figured out that the opposite of love is not anger, it's indifference, which is very true. So I think with fear, it's also something that I wouldn't expect. Like I would naturally want to say it's something like confidence, but I don't think that would be it.
Mm-hmm. That's close. And I think what the opposite of it is helps to breed confidence. It's curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm fearful, all I want to do is make that thing that's got me fearful go away. But when I'm authentic, I'm curious, what's the whole story? What's a more balanced story that I can tell? How do I help myself balance that little gal in my head that's yelling and screaming at me with something that'll help it to step down and be a little less loud? And when you really look at it as a personality, a part of your personality that you can have a conversation with at some level, my favorite thing is comparing it to the Southwest Airlines or whatever airlines, the counter agent who's in the airport and deals with all the people that have missed flights and that sort of thing. And any good service counter, what they've been trained is the first thing to do is, hey, how are you? Tell me what's going on. And some people are super, super mad when they get to the counter. And what the counter agent does is just lets them vent. And that's all the protector. Blah, 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 blah. And you guys, and blah, 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 blah. And at some point, it's like letting air out of a balloon. And at some point, the protector runs out of things to say. And that is where now the counter agent steps in and says, okay, let's see what we can do to help you. And it's the same thing when we honor, and the reason I say it's a protector with a capital P is we have to make the protector our friend, not our enemy. The ego is not the enemy. And as long as anybody thinks that the ego is the enemy, the ego wins. When you look at it as a protector that's really about trying to protect you, and it's not very good at it without that balance, the left and right brain, both having some say in what's going on. But when you do that, then you can kind of talk them down, and you do that by appreciation, by having a more realistic story. What's going on? If it's interpersonal, I'm really frustrated about what's going on. What's up with you? What's this? The story I'm telling is I'm really frustrated. Tell me what's going on so I can have a better understanding. And then we move on and we're in solution mode. See the difference in that whole idea of the three questions. What's the story I'm telling? Is it serving me in this moment? And is there a more authentic story I can tell? It's not about positive thinking. Hey, just put on a happy face.
Yeah, that doesn't work long term anyways.
Yep. Protectors, nope, not doing that. That's all garbage. So it's kind of a balancing act, but Boyle Boy really changes things dramatically.
It's a lot about practice, I guess, because it's not something that you can expect. I guess we are always told, right? Like, I remember growing up, if you saw somebody standing somewhere that was like muttering to themselves, then you would think like, oh, that person, they can't be very well because it looks like they're talking to themselves. And then I figured out when I started doing work that involved like more responsibility, and then eventually I started my own business, I spend a lot of time talking to myself. And if I don't, it's a problem, because then it's like the rabbit in my brain is running faster and nothing good ever comes out of that. Like just before we got here, something went wrong with a client. So that was like in my head, and I was like, it's like, oh, blah, 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 and this and that. And then I was thinking about what we're going to be talking about. And then I was like, hang on a minute. I was like, there's no point to this. There's legit no point to this right now. Something hasn't worked. So what? Like, I can't do anything about it now. It's in the past, actually. So all I can do is try and help them, but there's nothing else that I can do.
But see the difference in the orientation is that you go from a problem orientation to a solution orientation, which includes, oh, gee, you know what? There is nothing I can do about this right now.
Yeah.
And that's reality. So much of little me thinking, oh, so let's just finish this out. If you were to take a piece of 8.5 by 11 or A4 paper and put it sideways, so it's landscape. Top left corner, you put the first question, what's the story I'm telling? Middle left side of the paper, you write. In the middle down, the second question, is this story serving me in this moment? And then on the bottom left corner, you write, is there a more authentic story I can tell? On the second one, if you were to draw a line horizontally from the second question across the page, above that line, we say our thinking doesn't serve us. And below the line, we say we have thinking that does serve us. So above the line, I call that little me land. And we all seem to kind of go, oh yeah, I got a little me. And that's all the protector stuff, right? You can feel that there was that laugh that I was talking about. Right?
It sure exists.
We're embarrassed by it, but we all have it. And so I want to get to real. That's why I'm so against positive thinking. I want authentic thinking. You have got to deal with the issues up there, not push them away and put on a happy face. You got to be able to put them in perspective, move down below the line to authentic me, which is what I call that, and then be able to deal with those things from a place that serves you. If this is an interpersonal thing, I guarantee you below the line, authentic thinking is always going to be helpful for the person that I'm interacting with or dealing with, because I'm thinking authentically and I've got a bigger, broader, more light, in my model, and anybody can see it on other stories we tell. As you go further up above that line, it just gets darker and darker. And so when you think about going back to what we were talking about with the left and right brain, the left brain balanced with the right is a wonderful place to be. And occasionally the left brain shuts down, way down, and I can drive for 30 minutes without knowing what I did. But the right brain has absolutely got it. It's rare that you come out of that. It's jarring when you come out of driving for 30 minutes and not knowing what happened in the last 30 minutes. But if you were to go just before that, that is a wonderful place to be. It's also called flow. And so being below the line is really our goal, but never, ever is our goal not to ever go above the line into little me thinking, because it's impossible. You're always going to have that protector. But the question is, can I create enough of a relationship with that protector where he or she is comfortable that I've got things in hand, right? That I've dealt with their concerns and have broadened those with a right brain perspective by looking at the bigger picture and getting things into perspective. And so I always want people to be authentic thinkers that deal with the good and the bad above the line and balance it with below the line thinking.
Hey, are you spending hours extra editing every other week because you forgot to do things like switching off your aircon or moving the dog outside of the house? Did you secure an amazing guest interview only to then forget to press record? Or maybe your guest forgot to press record and now you have to work with a really low quality backup recording? Do you want to batch your show and finally get ahead, but you can't for the life of you remember what's already done and what's not? Don't worry, this is really normal. There are way more steps involved in running a successful, high-quality podcast than meets the eye, and it's really easy to forget something here and there. But let's be realistic. If you really want to grow your show, you can't carry on like this. If you want to design a podcasting workflow that works, then grab our podcast workflow blueprint now. You'll get immediate access to our entire podcast workflow that we've been using with all of our clients for months. The blueprint contains a video training that explains exactly how our system works, the Trello board template that you can just plug into your account or transfer to your platform of choice, the fully customizable template episode workflows, guest email swipes, and as a bonus, the guest booking automation video training. You can check it all out and get your copy at pristinepodcast.com/blueprint. And now back to the episode. It really does. And I think the protector has a point, right? I mean, there could be some situations where action really is required and we do need to do something. And it has to happen rather fast. So it's not like there isn't a point to it. It's just a case that if we get stuck there isn't going to be much growth, because I can tell when I'm working with people that are very much stuck in the problem and not in the solution. I find that highly irritating and I will likely quit. Because what happens is stuff goes wrong, right? Like I don't know a single time where stuff doesn't go wrong. Yes, you need to check what went wrong. Yes, you need to check why it went wrong. Yep, you need to find some way to prevent it. But what you don't need to do is to go into that problem and start pointing the fingers and shout at people and be like, oh, get out, whatever. And I find that very frustrating because I'm thinking that this is gone now.
But here's the thing. So this becomes the practice. Like my practice is, my wife has had... over the last 30 years has had plenty of reasons to be angry with me and vice versa. But what I learned through this process was that the best thing to do was to stay below that line as best as you can and let them vent. I mean, for my wife, like when she gets mad, blah, 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 it's all valid stuff. I listen to it. And then at some point she stops and she typically gets a smile on her face because I have not pushed back. Like the worst thing that you can do with somebody that's misbehaving is go up above the line and start butting heads with them, with me. When you can stay below them in their behavior, not even necessarily below the line, like you can be super bugged about what's going on and above the line, but if you can keep your thinking below the line of, I'm going to let this person go through this and I'm going to focus on solution. I'm not going to be stuck in the problem. That is a huge, huge piece of practice. And you know, above the line, we're all about black or white, getting to happiness or whatever it is, or, you know, getting rid of this person who's misbehaving. Below the line, we're like, what do we do to make this a fit? And then if it's not a fit, like, hey, you know what? This is clearly not a fit. And sometimes that's something you know right away. But most of the time,
it takes long.
When we can stay below the line in our thinking, there's a solution. And the thing that's really fascinating about it is if you've got somebody who's really cranky, and you can take the time to stay below the line and work through it, they tend to flip. And now you've got somebody who's super on your side in ways that you never would have imagined. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but gee, there's all kinds of opportunity for our behavior to influence other people's behavior. And when I apply this model to other people, my boy used to say to me, Dad, are you in little mode right now? And I could say, you know what, dude? I sure am.
You have a good point.
I'm going to stay here for a little bit, but it's a good point. And so, you know, that's the other thing that's so lovely about this is when you realize that this model is universal, it applies to everybody the same way. And so when I have the knowledge of, oh my God, that person's in little me mode, I'm just going to stay down in here in authentic me mode and see what we can come up with. Problem orientation for the person above the line, solution orientation. And it's not about positive thinking. It's about realistically looking at what's going on and what can I do to bring value to this conversation or this relationship or to my kids or to work.
It's about responding, not reacting so much. I guess it takes time and it takes effort, a lot of effort sometimes, depending on how harshly you're being approached. That's when I have to like...
But what is wrong with that effort? And this is the thing, you know, little me's like, oh, I don't want to, you know. Well, when I'm authentic, I'm way more process oriented. And so I become a student of the process and a student of what I can do to help that thing along and to solve those issues or whatever the case may be, to help to shepherd my kids along. You know, it's just a whole different, you think about people above the line who parent, you know, a fist on the table kind of thing. Gee, that's exciting and wonderful. And guess how my kids are going to react and behave, you know, with their kids and so on and so forth. So, you know, it's also about breaking cycles, but very much about if you're much more process oriented when you're in authentic me mode.
Yeah, I think so. And is there a way that we can spend more time in that more enlightened flow state? Do you find that there's something that facilitates that more?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a bunch of things that we can do. And one of the things, just as a side note, what this model is all about is helping you figure out what's best for you, not me prescribing what's best for you. So there are a few things, though, that tend to have a really nice impact. Number one, just practicing the model and, you know, just recognizing where you are and see how your frustration with the protector in your head, just like, just recognize, oh, that's the protector. It's all good. It's all good. It's okay. It has a tendency to mellow that out. I refer to the model as being a way to put on a clear set of glasses, not rose-colored, not dark. Like, it just opens me up. I'm more curious. I'm more open to what's going on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is appreciation. And this is another one that makes me a little nutty. You know, everybody's talking about gratitude. Well, tell me how you're going to be grateful for getting beat up at school or your parents yelling at you or whatever adverse things that you had growing up and through life, grateful doesn't tend to work for it. Appreciation really does. Because now what I'm doing, again, it's that balanced story, right? I'm appreciating, gee, what is it that got dad to behave that way? I wonder if his dad was a jerk too, kind of thing. And, what are the things that I can do to break that cycle? So appreciation doesn't condone tough stuff that happened. This is where character is built, right? I mean, so much of character is about having experiences that are difficult and we react above the line. Think of a situation that was really scary and now you talk about it and you get a big old smile on your face. Like that's natural. And you can accelerate that process from weeks, months, years, hours, whatever. You can really condense it just by appreciating the whole thing. Like, a very good friend of mine says, where's the gift in this? And there are gifts. And so, that is where character is built when I am able to move myself, those issues from above the line in little me mode into authentic me mode, where we still look at them honestly. We don't try to push them away, but we also look at the value that they've brought.
Yeah, it does. I did an interview earlier with a lovely lady called Marie who has a podcast where she interviews people about stories of resilience and grit. And we just talked about something similar earlier because she's kind of into looking at what makes people get back up and go back at it, where other people in the same situation don't have the same response. My dad passed away like 2 years ago. I've lost this whole COVID thing. It's like skewed my time perception. I think it's been 2 years already. And basically, I started thinking about a lot of things after that happened, because things that had never occurred to me as being like difficult before occurred to me afterwards, that maybe not everyone was having that same experience. And I wonder why. And I wasn't upset for very long. Like a lot of the things that he did and the choices that he made, he ended up getting cancer and he committed suicide, basically. But a lot of the choices that he made, they are perfectly realistic from his perception, and I could see how his whole life from childhood to now has added up to that decision making. And I was like, yeah, I guess if I was in that situation, I would have probably done the same thing. So, I'm not even angry anymore. Like, there's no point to this. And I just got on with it. I gave it the time that it was needed and then moved on.
And that's the thing. Basically, what you're saying is you appreciate it. You took the time to look at the broader situation and not just leave it at, him leaving the planet, right? Because that's icky and no fun and nobody wants, right?
No.
But what you're saying is you appreciated the whole story to the best of your understanding. And now, because I've appreciated it and understood it and been open to it, the grieving process is way shortened, right? And now you look at him and say, yeah, I miss him. I wish that's not the way he had gone, but I don't blame him. And now my time looking back on my dad is something that's, because I've been in appreciation about it, that's way more rewarding.
Yeah, because I think of the fun things and I'm not stuck in that painful moment forever. Like, how long am I going to be stuck there? What does that help me now? And he wouldn't want me to be stuck in that moment either. So what is the point? So that's why I think it's very important to find a way. Like you said, it's curiosity. I'm like, I wonder why this happened. Why did he decide not to go for the therapy that was offered to him? And then I see, because, it's been a story for a long time that people don't get help and men are strong and all these things that, they lead to a certain point, and the point is probably not a good one. So I get it. And now I just, I think back of the fun that we had or the places we went, and, so I don't really have that super negative stuck thing. And I think that helped me for sure an awful lot about a lot of things.
You're talking about exactly what I want to help people to do, is to work through those things in a way and recognize that letting the little protector yell and scream at me about how awful this is and blah, 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 doesn't serve me. And that's why I want to get away. That's why I'm so adamant about this. Can't be about emotions. Because here's the thing. If I use emotions as my way of determining where I am, I'm stuck there. When I look at how I feel and say, oh, gee, this feeling is an indicator, that's a whole different thing. I had a situation a couple of days ago where I bowed out of a group that I've been a part of for a couple of years. And I had an issue with one of the people writing a proposal that I had said multiple times, I really don't think we're doing this right, and we didn't get the business. And it was just time to let that go. And so I got on this call and I was super uptight. I wasn't relaxed. You could see that I was struggling with having to deal with this to the point where they're like, are you okay?
Yeah.
But my thinking was below the line. I'm not going to get all accusatory. I know that this is the right decision. I'm comfortable with the decision and letting them know, yeah, it's hard for me right now, and I'm definitely above the line emotionally, but thinking-wise, we got off the call. It wasn't some yelling match or, I mean, think about how south those things can go. And all of that doesn't happen. And so it's just a wonderful, wonderful way to have perspective, to have meaning. So, going back to the practices, appreciation, sitting quietly for a minimum of 5 minutes and just not doing anything. A lot of people call it meditation. I don't care what you call it. Doing that 3 or 4 times a week, minimum of 5 minutes. For me, that has turned into 15 or 20-minute sessions of just quietness. And what happens is at some point that little me voice starts to shut down. And that's all of this is. Anybody that's trying to help you to be enlightened is in reality trying to help you to quiet that part of the left side of your brain where the protector lives. And when the protector is quiet, you're in flow. Jill Bolte Taylor, the woman that had the stroke, she called it her deep inner peace circuitry. And she said it was like all of a sudden, all the baggage of 30-something years was gone. And it was quiet and it was lovely and it was the most amazing place to be. And she knows she's having a stroke. Like when you think about the juxtaposition of those two places and that right brain enlightened, that little light of mine is always there. When I begin to bring this protector down and mellow him out, then I'm going to dip down into that enlightened place way more. And I'm also not making it a goal. My goal is I really want to have a good time with my family and really be in a place of meaning. I want to go camping with the friends that we raised our kids together in 2 weeks. And I just know there's not going to be any judgment. Judgment all lives above the line. And it's going to be this place where we just appreciate being together. And oh my God, that is such a different place to live. And yet, if you don't understand kind of the dynamics of that, which is what this model is all about, is helping you to understand those dynamics, it's a much harder road. And, all the crystals and, lavender underwear and,
some essential oils and, full moon rituals, they're not going to help.
They might, but if what you're doing is thinking that it's the positive side of little me thinking, if you're thinking that all of a sudden, all of this stuff is going to go perfectly when I do those things versus being below the line, like, you know what? I would really like to smell an essential oil, or I'd like to really go out and appreciate the moon. Like there's miles of difference. I see a couple of people online that, well, today I had a cleansing meal. It's like, oh my God. And they want it to be real so bad, but they're so stuck. And if I just, very much little me thinking is, if I just do this, this, and this, everything will be fine. Doesn't work that way. Does not work that way. And when you look at people in the kind of old style enlightenment movement, it's not working. And it's so sad to see because they're so frustrated. They're trying to do what they believe is the right things to do. Like, another thing that little me thinking, well, you just have to do the right thing. If you do the right thing and you behave the right way, everything will be fine. I'm sure of it, but it's not. And I don't understand why it's not.
That's why I have a problem with a lot of those prescriptive business coaches and things. Like I've been online for so long and in the beginning, I was like, well, if someone just gives me the list and they give me a paper and they tell me, here's what you're going to do. And then I'm going to do that and then it's going to work. And I did exactly what they said and it didn't work. And then I did exactly what somebody else said and it didn't work. And eventually, after like 2 years of trying what everyone else was telling me, I was like, right, I hate this and I hate that and I hate that. I'm not going to do it. And then I just did the things that I like to do and that I found easy.
The thing that's such a drag about that, what happens is little me, the protector, is like, oh, here we go again. That's not going to work, right? We get jaded to it. The protector just give me a damn list. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And it doesn't work. And so that's when we look at it from the perspective of this model. I say, does this serve me? And we know, when you ask yourself, is this serving me? You can be positive or negative above the line and know in your heart that this isn't really serving me. And so, from my standpoint, what I want this model to do is give you the ability to figure that stuff on your own. You know what works and what doesn't. And, the protector is just like, give me a damn list. Let me rest. Is a big piece of exhaustion is just the protector is so overworked trying to protect you and doesn't have any idea how to do it. If you give me a list, everything will be fine.
Yeah, I guess that's why we like to offer freebies for download that are like lists and things, because that's what people are desperately, actively looking for, but it's not what they need. And that's the thing that comes afterwards is what you actually need. And that's why it works so well. So we are, of course, like with everyone else, over our time because it's actually not enough time. And I'm going to ask everyone else to extend their time by at least 15 minutes going forward because everyone is so interesting and there are so many more things to learn. So the reason why I thought this was so key is because we're talking to podcasters, many of whom are thinking for a year or a year and a half about putting out their content and they're not doing it because their voice is telling them that you can't do it, you're not ready, you don't have the right stuff. What if somebody from your work sees this? What if your mom judges you? What if your ex suddenly calls you and I can't do it? And then so many good things don't happen and we focus on those practical details, but we're not focusing on the message that actually wants to come out. And as a result, like nothing ever happens and nothing comes to the person because they're clinging on for dear life, like so badly. And when I was looking at this, I thought, actually, this is a way where people can do the things that they want to do in the way that they want to do them and how they feel good. And in turn, they'll pass it forward to the next person because they'll approach their audience in the same way. And that's why I thought this was very nice because you're talking indirectly to a bunch of people who are talking to a whole load of people. And I think if more of us think that way, the change is contagious.
A little off topic, but right on what you're saying. I used to do a radio show for a local chamber of commerce, so I'd interview businesses. And at some point, I talked to the general manager because I was doing all kinds of prep and spending hours. And he said, just know your first question. And I was like, oh. And so then they became very conversational. And they were okay before. But what's fascinating to me and the thing that potential podcasters need to know is that when you're having this kind of an interaction with a good interviewer, which you happen to be, I'm a good interviewer too, what happens is, it's just fascinating. I watch this happen all the time. People walk into the radio station, white knuckled, right? Super. And what happens is when you relax somebody, I don't know, it's how you engage, but what happens is, think about it. In my model, the protector is like, oh my God, I don't want to blow it. What if so-and-so, like all the what ifs, right? He's really trying to protect you. But with a good interviewer, very quickly that goes away. And what fascinates me and what every potential podcaster should know is, I promise your very best content is going to come out of these kind of interviews or where you're talking about something, because there's this inner part of us that when the protectors kind of shut down, all these things that we know are like, oh my God, where
did that come from?
It comes right out of you. And it's amazing how much people have in them that they have no idea because they got that little guy shouting, oh, I hope I don't blow it. So no, podcasting is a wonderful way to do it. Whether you're on your own or with somebody else, you'll be shocked. When you start talking about something, all that stuff goes away and I move into a really pretty flowy, often place where I'm able to articulate things that I hadn't thought about.
And I think that's why it happens so easily, that time flies when that happens. And that's what happens to me all the time when it comes to work. And the same with interviews, because there's so much good stuff that you could ask about and think about. And every person adds new examples to the library that you can then use with somebody else. And there's so much to get. So it's endless. It's a shame that there isn't enough time. That's what I said to the previous person too. But it's a shame there's never enough time to talk to all the people and hear all the stories and get their perspectives. And we can only do what we can do with the time that we have, and just use it as wisely.
And hopefully it's something that gives you an incentive to keep digging and that sort of thing. Process. Like, here's a new part of the process that I want to examine.
Yeah. So when people want to come and look for more information, where do they go?
Couple of places. First is ohthestorieswetell.com is where the website is. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at Oh the Stories We Tell. And on YouTube, if you do a search for Oh the Stories We Tell, a little thought bubble icon will come up with Oh the Stories We Tell inside.
I will link it up.
And that's my channel. What I recommend is there's a playlist called The Honesty Project that a friend of mine and I've been working on for about a year and a half now. And I think there's about 14 or so episodes up there. And it's just a woman that has had a real rough upbringing, and we're about the same age. And we just talk about stuff, whether it's business, relationships, and just apply the model to it. So it's not therapy. That's the other thing. This is not therapy. This is about self-awareness and really working out your shit and changing your stories. And by the way, you can message me on my website, on Facebook, and I'm very interested in chatting with anybody that wants to learn more about it. I'm getting close to getting an online class done. And when I've got that, we'll let everybody know too.
Yeah, I think that would be really nice for people to be able to find out more, to learn to practice it and have time set aside for it. Sometimes it's the financial investment that then gets people to actually take action on something instead of just having it in their storage as, this is something I could use, but I'm not going to right now.
Absolutely.
It's like commitment.
About all the stuff we collect every day.
Yeah.
All the stuff we collect for free and don't do anything with. So
yeah.
It won't be super expensive, but it'll be enough to make you think twice.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
It is my absolute pleasure.
Thank you. All right, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Do make sure to check out Chris's work over on his website. If you enjoyed the show, our entire team would appreciate if you leave us a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening, and maybe we'll even give you a shout out on one of the upcoming episodes. As always, I hope that you have an amazing day, and we will see you for the next one. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate you. If you're ready to step out of overwhelm, then don't forget to check out the podcast workflow blueprint at pristinepodcast.com/blueprint. The link is also in the show notes.